Hello, everyone, and welcome to the talk show. So, today we have a very special guest from, or rather, co creators, I would call it, from the US. And she goes by the name Leilah Devi. Hello, Leilah, welcome.
Hi, that's my name.
So, just a brief background and biography of Leilah Devi. She's Ashtanga practitioner, student, teacher, also a kettlebell instructor, and an avid music fan of music, heavy metal, ambient music, and someone who's also deep into the occult, spiritual, esoteric realms as well. So, very interesting conversation we will have today. So, Leila, would you like to begin by sharing with us more about maybe your name? First of all, Leilah Devi, would you like to explain about the significance of your name?
Hmm. Sure. Well, it's not my given name, although it's a similar variation of my given name. Layla is actually an Arabic name. It means night or refers to the dark color, bluish black of midnight. Usually just translated as night. And Devi is to signify that I consider myself as part of the cult of the Devi, the goddess worshipping Shakti cult. Yeah. So as you talk about being into the occult, I figure we might as well just explain it like that.
Was it a name which is given through an initiation, or is it more like a self-created motto?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was through any external initiation, although definitely taking that name marked some sort of transformative process in myself. Yeah.
Nice. So I've noticed on your Instagram account you go by the motto of a strength, sadhana, shakti. Would you like to speak to us a bit more about this motto you have described yourself
Sure.
with?
Yeah, sure. Well, I feel like those three things are kind of my three main areas of focus and interest. Strength in the sense of strength training. You know, I love to train with weights, as you mentioned, kettlebells and calisthenics, as well as highly valuing strength of mind, I guess. Strength of spirit is very important, as well as strength of the body. Sadhana is a Sanskrit word referring to a ongoing spiritual practice. In this case, I feel I meant it more to pertain to my yoga practice, which is an ongoing spiritual endeavor. Sadhana and Shakti, to speak of again that devotion to the goddess and to the energy, the divine feminine energy, I suppose, Shakti. Yeah.
Yeah. So in regards to the first term you mentioned, strength, well, would you like to elaborate a bit more in terms of your personal practice with Ashtanga yoga and kettlebell?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. Well, Ashtanga yoga is a kind of a more strengthening style of yoga. It's a fairly demanding, vigorous vinyasa practice. So, strength of body is definitely developed there, strength of will as well in that sort of daily discipline. But uh, aside from that, I also work to deliberately increase my bodily strength, I suppose, with weights. I like to use kettlebells a lot, although we use some other tools as well, barbells. I've, to be specific, I have been training with the Wolf Brigade gym out of Rochester, New York, and following Greg's instruction and programming as much as possible for, I think it's about 2 years now, maybe 2 years, something like that. So before I met Greg at Wolf Brigade, I was a Strong First certified kettlebell instructor. I was a kettlebell coach in Seattle when I lived in Seattle. So I already had that interest and that pursuit. But then when I found the Wolf Brigade, I really started to focus on their style of training, strength and conditioning with heavier kettlebells, and a few different tools. It's kind of an expert generalism is what they call it. So working to really fine-tune detailed, deliberate movement and sort of maximum effort to get as kind of functionally strong as possible.
Yeah. Ashtanga, well, in my experience, Ashtanga in the practice of yoga asana, Ashtanga is the most physical. It requires a lot of strength. It requires a lot of flexibility, dynamism. You know, I think besides the having the strength and having the flexibility, it's about the dynamic movement as well, based on the Tristana, right? The 3 points of the breath, of the drishti, and all this. So, how does that tie in with your kettlebell practice as well? I mean, did you get into Ashtanga first? Like, how did you get into Ashtanga, and how did you incorporate strength training with kettlebell as well?
Right. Well, it's been kind of an experiment for me in that I didn't really know anyone I practiced Ashtanga first. I discovered Ashtanga, I think, in like 2005, maybe I started practicing, maybe 2004. I don't quite recall, but I practiced that for a long time before I started getting more serious about strength training. And I still don't really know anyone who pursues both disciplines kind of quite as far as I do. I mean, I had gotten quite far in Ashtanga and was practicing the 3rd series in India and even into the 4th series while I was there maybe a couple of years ago. So those are poses that require, I mean, the practice itself just requires a lot of energy, but they also require kind of extreme flexibility, as you mentioned. So in some ways, the strength training kind of clashes with that. When you lift weights, you don't really want everything to be open and stretched and relaxed. So there's a matter of kind of timing things so that I don't hurt myself, because if I try to go deadlift, 200 pounds after I've done Kapotasana and catch my heels in the back bend, it doesn't make any sense to try to do that at all. So it's been a kind of a struggle actually to balance them, to maintain my flexibility while getting stronger. I feel like Ashtanga emphasizes flexibility quite a lot, even though there are many postures that demand a lot of strength. They're all sort of body weight holds and lifts, but they take a lot of strength. But ultimately, it's the flexibility that allows you to kind of continue into the more advanced series, I think. So there's a bit of a conflict, actually, with the strength training and maintaining that degree of flexibility for me. I'm sure some people can do it, maybe that are a little bit more open and flexible naturally. I don't really feel like I'm one of those very bendy people that often come to yoga classes or, find yoga because it's something that their body kind of naturally does. I feel like I am kind of medium, like I can get into some of those bendy postures, but it's not always that easy. So there's a bit of a conflict, but I really feel like it's so important to develop strength that I've started to prize that more than high degrees of flexibility. So I start to kind of shift my focus toward the strength training. And then sometimes it shifts back to yoga when I feel like I really need to work on my practice. So kind of go back and forth, and it's just trying to balance. I don't always have enough energy to do everything I feel like I would like to do
Yeah,
physically.
I mean,
Sure.
what you're doing is definitely very unique, combining very, some people might argue it's very polarizing forms of different activities as well, but it's complementary. You've made it very complementary in a way, I guess, because sometimes with certain strength training, well, maybe not necessarily kettlebell, but maybe other forms of strength training, it could also create a body in a kind of a very rigid form of way with less flexibility, more
Yeah.
mundane or rather mechanical movements rather than dynamic movements, and Ashtanga provides dynamism. So yeah, I think what you're doing is quite unique in its way, but as you mentioned, you're going to be mindful about how you're going to go into each training. And
Yes, definitely. I do feel that they ultimately complement each other. Yes, definitely. It's just that I feel like maybe sometimes you take a step forward in one and a step backward in the other. But ultimately, it's both going forward. That makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So in terms of so we spoke a bit here about the strength part, the physical activities you're doing. So in terms of the sadhana part, would you like to share with us a bit more of your spiritual journey, like some of the practices you've been in, some of the traditions you've been drawn to over the years?
Yeah, well, sure. I guess even as a child, I was drawn toward kind of esoteric subject matter. I grew up um, right by Salem, Massachusetts. So
Nice.
there was
Rich
always
girl.
this kind of witch trial mythology. And I don't know, I got into like reading books about all sorts of occult activity when I was just, 12 or 13 there. So I was always drawn to witchcraft and the occult, I suppose. Then a bit later in life, still was drawn towards those things. Magic, the studies of, as I got older, I became more interested in maybe the left-hand path and sort of veered off in that direction pretty strongly. And yeah, I didn't discover yoga until, like I said, about 2005, and then started to think more about the spiritual aspects of yoga maybe after a couple of years or a few years of practice. Then I started to think about the spiritual side a little bit more. But, maybe in more recent years, then I started exploring Buddhism as well, and Vajrayana and Tantric Buddhism in particular. And I guess generally now I consider my sadhana to be of a tantric nature. Yeah.
More towards the Tibetan, or is it some elements of the
Yeah,
Kashmiri Shaivism, Indian
yeah
Tantra?
I really can't say that I'm like adhering to one specific system in that way. I feel like, for one, I don't have this sort of ritualized kind of linear approach. Also, I've been interested more in like Dzogchen type studies over the past several years. So not this what they call like a graduated approach. I mean,
Right.
I'm not a Hindu, so I'm not really, I can't say, oh, I'm a part of this like non-dual Shaivite tantric school or something. I mean, I feel like a bit of a fraud to try to claim those things. I'm just saying that that's where my interest lies, in particular in relation to Kali and the Kaula Kula school of Tantra. And as I said, Dzogchen and this like Vajrayana Buddhism also.
Yeah.
What kind of draw me the most?
Yeah. I remember when I was really young, this was in the early 90s, and I had this book which was given to me, and actually, given to us, and it was a book called Millennium Prophecies, and it was written by an author called Stephen Skinner.
Mm-hmm.
And later on in my later teens, early 20s, I found out that Stephen Skinner actually is one of the foremost writers of John Dee, Enochian magic,
Okay.
and also like East, like a Chinese Feng Shui geomancy as well.
Oh,
So
interesting.
and he's a veteran writer based in Singapore as well. I've not met him in person, but he's very highly esteemed in the occult field. So this book, Millennium Prophecies, when I was 6 years old back in 94, it was already covering such a wide range of the occult and supernatural. And at 6 years old, reading the biography or just like a short, some short information on Aleister Crowley,
Mm-hmm.
on even stories like David Koresh, you know,
Oh.
that, I mean, just having that kind of like upbringing with some of my reading fascination, I think definitely had a big impact later on.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
something similar to as what you mentioned at being at a young age, in your first 6 to 12 years, being drawn and fascinated already by
yeah,
the
definitely.
mystical side. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Always. I
yeah,
remember playing with my little girlfriend, being witches in the forest and reading about poltergeists. I was really into poltergeists when I was little. Not into them, but fascinated by the idea and this kind of thing, uh,
yeah,
thinking of ghosts and spells, and it just went from there. It was always
yeah,
like that.
yeah, definitely. And you've also mentioned Dzogchen,
Yeah,
the great perfection, and it's actually a very profound practice,
it is.
and
It is.
as you mentioned, it's not as gradual, you know.
Right.
The school which I'm practicing now is in Tibetan Buddhism is from the Gelug school,
Yes.
and that is more of the gradual path. Of course, His
Mhm.
Holiness the Dalai Lama is,
Mhm.
in the Gelug tradition, and the Dzogchen has been in my introduction to Tibetan Buddhism. Some of the teachings also, which I started off reading, were from the Dzogchen tradition, and it's a very interesting um, path, or rather, to even call it a path, because
It's not a path,
yeah,
actually.
yeah, it's just the state of the nature of mind as it is,
Yeah,
Dzogchen. Yeah.
yeah.
Would you like to share with us a bit more about your studies and practice in Dzogchen?
Yeah, it's funny because I just feel so incapable of even uh, understanding it, let alone explaining it to someone else. But I guess the basic precept, I mean, it's the kind of pinnacle. And don't, if I'm wrong, like I said, I'm not an expert, I'm a student, but as far as I understand, it's kind of the pinnacle of Tibetan Buddhism. Ultimately it's the like secret Thai tantric uh, practice of Tibetan Buddhism. So, but I mean, it doesn't really need to be conceived of in that frame of Tibetan Buddhism. I feel like it's more of a universal kind of perception in the idea. The main idea or tenet is that the nature of reality is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is the nature of reality. So we practice kind of meditation in non-meditation, and this kind of like participation in the present moment, but there's also a sense of detachment, and that everything is the manifestation of this spaciousness, this compassion. Ultimately, I guess you could call it Buddha. I don't know if in Dzogchen they still use that word, of course, but that it's the nature of the mind, basically. I like I said, I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Very, very bad job. But I find it very interesting because I feel like, especially if it's kind of ultimately comforting to me, and it's kind of like you could be enlightened at any moment. You don't need to go through this graduated path, or even like in Vajrayana school of Buddhism, which I initially was introduced to Dzogchen actually before I went and studied Vajrayana, and took refuge in the Nyingma lineage, right. Vajrayana. But that's a based around the performance of rituals and mantra, and maybe if you do all of these things and you practice a lot, you can achieve enlightenment or that kind of spaciousness of mind in this lifetime.
Yes.
Right? But Dzogchen teaches that you can basically achieve that now. I mean, maybe. Maybe. I don't think it's that easy, but it's basically shifting the mind, shifting the way you see the world, and definitely becoming kind of an observer, I think. You know, it's observing nature, the nature of reality, which seems like kind of a manifestation of the mind. But definitely tantric in the idea that it's all coming from one divine source. All these things are different forms and different shapes of the same source.
Yeah. And I think some of the approaches of a lot of this higher schools, or rather, this deeper teachings, if I might call it, also is viewing things from a very transformed state. Like, instead of an aspirant, like striving towards enlighten, you already see yourself in a way as an enlightened, like you're already the Buddha nature in some sense.
Yeah, I definitely really never see myself in that way. But I feel like it's possible to kind of look through those eyes sometimes. I mean, I don't know. A lot of those schools are based on compassion, and Dzogchen also. Although even that, it's like nothing is necessarily judged better than the other, better than its opposite. It's all kind of neutral. I feel like in Dzogchen, you can simply kind of be in the moment and observe, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well. Would you like to share a bit more of, I know you travel quite a bit. I've been following your Instagram for a few years now, and sometimes it's a bit difficult to pinpoint where you're at. It's like 1 minute I see a couple of pictures from Mysore or Goa in India, and the next minute it's like, oh, you're back in the US.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the countries you really love traveling to, and where have you been really around?
Well, you know what, I would love to travel more in Northern Europe and Scandinavia. Honestly, that would be like my next destination. I'd love to go to Scotland as well and just take a kind of a different trip. I've been going to India a lot over the past 14 or 15 years, and spending a lot of time there. So I feel like I've kind of done that enough for a while, although actually my next big trip will also be to India if I'm allowed to do that. Uh, I've been to Southeast Asia. I've been to lots of different places, but over the past few years, I think most of my travels have been related to either, practicing yoga, studying Ashtanga with teachers in Mysore, my gurus in Mysore, and then with other teachers in India. Or in the US, I've traveled just kind of around to Rochester to do strength training with my coach there. And yeah, it's kind of usually based on my endeavor as opposed to tourism.
Yeah. And what was your longest trip in India? Like at one stage?
Well, 6 months, but then you have to leave. So I think maybe once I was there for 8 months. I went to Nepal and then came back and stayed. So
Nice. Any
8 to 10 months.
yeah. So your next venture might lead you into Europe more, Iceland, Sweden,
Yeah,
more?
Iceland, okay. I'd rather go to like Norway and Sweden. Yeah, all of those places and just see the nature and breathe the air, and kind of connect with that. I have a strong feeling for all things Nordic, I suppose. So
Right.
I would like to kind of just be in that land, be in that place, and feel that connection. I think when I travel to India, even though I get really into the yoga studies and spend a lot of time there to the point where, you kind of embrace it as a home, but I never really felt like it was my place. I always have felt like an outsider there. Yeah.
Yeah. If not for this strange situation we are all undergoing on a
Mm-hmm.
wider scale on the planet, with coronavirus, the COVID-19. Actually, I was supposed to be in India at this point for a really long trip as well, doing a few retreats and all this. But, I think it's a unique situation, challenging for most of us in some ways. So how have you been spending your time, with initially with the lockdown and all that? How in the situation in the States, were you able during the lockdown in your state? Were
I don't
you?
want to implicate myself here by
Yeah.
speaking too honestly about that, but I mean, I don't really feel like I should use the word lockdown. That sounds like
Right.
something you do to a prisoner, and I'm
Yeah.
still not imprisoned yet, so I don't really abide by that. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna if I can possibly help it.
Yeah.
Quarantine is another one. This is like
Quarantine. Yeah.
total bullshit.
It's
So
psychological,
my
isn't it?
language,
It's
huh?
almost psychological, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a psyop. That's what
It's a
it's called.
psyop.
It's a
Yeah.
psychological operation, like the
Yeah.
CIA does on
Yeah.
Manchurian candidates and whatnot. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
a psychological mind fuck and excuse my language, but I just really don't like what's going on right now. And I'm not gonna pretend like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
real because it's not.
Yeah. In Singapore, they call it the circuit breaker.
Oh, what's that?
It's
What
an
does that mean?
it's an engineering term. I think one of the one of the lead guys on the task force came from an engineering background, if I'm not wrong. And instead of the other country following what the other countries call quarantine, lockdown, and whatnot, they call it the circuit breaker, which is, yeah. But I mean, it is what it is, and yeah, I mean, it's a very the certain kind of situation. And I think like we were just speaking of travel and the way of work and practice. I think our view of a lot of these things and our normalized way or routine, I think it will be quite different now, and it will be in a different kind of way. Maybe even like traveling might be in a different way. I mean, we just have to see how it goes.
Yes.
So another thing I would like to also bring the attention of this conversation also is Ashtanga yoga and heavy metal music, or specifically doom metal, black metal. Would you like to share with us some of these lessons and classes you teach?
Sure, sure. Yeah, well, I guess I use the term metal kind of loosely or more as an umbrella to kind of imply the spirit of the thing. Then, we do listen to metal music for sure, but tries to be like more melodic stuff. I do like to listen to lots of different things. So, some dark ambient music or some kind of ritual ambient stuff, more melodic metal, black metal, doom, these things that you can practice and still kind of be in a meditative state if you like metal, but nothing too jarring, nothing like thrash metal or some AC/DC or something like this, like something more meditative. I like to play, or maybe even just kind of darker, kind of doomy stuff. Yeah. And then, yeah, we
So
do vinyasa yoga. So
vinyasa, okay.
all levels of vinyasa. My experience is, really rooted in Ashtanga yoga. So it definitely draws from that, but it's not strictly that. Yeah.
And the kind of students in your experience so far leading classes, I mean, are most of them fans of rock music, metalheads, or do you have like interesting cases of people coming in and like, wow, what is this?
Well, this is interesting to kind of tie this into the previous subject we were talking about, the circuit breaker, the lockdown, and how that affected things. And in a way, what did happen because of that was that teachers and like myself started teaching on Zoom, like this app that we're using right now, which I have mixed feelings about, but it did make it possible for students from around the world to practice with me online, whereas before it was people from the neighborhood that lived near the yoga shala or wanted to come to that yoga studio. Basically, now it's more accessible to more people, so the people that tend to seek me out tend to be more metalheads probably than like the average yoga student. Yeah, I would say that's true. But it also enables me to practice with my teacher who's far away. So that's cool. It kind of opened things up in that way. I never wanted to be teaching yoga online. I never wanted to be sitting in front of a computer screen. I wanted to be in the shala where no phones are allowed, where it's very much energetic, like physical interaction. And I spent years learning how to give physical adjustments in the class. And with you get physically close to people and breathe heavily in a small space together. It's like the last thing most people want to do all of a sudden. So now it's Zoom and kind of relying on that technology, as well as that whatever corporation owns this and whatever guidelines they set or privacy rules they set. It's kind of strange because, not to go off on a tangent, but we all can kind of like see into each other's private spaces, and then you have like the eye of Big Brother there that can also see into your private space and record every word you said and probably what you said in the next room. It's kind of a weird time. But like my teacher said, well, while we're all kind of stuck at home, it's actually the perfect time to practice yoga. Strangely, it is. So it's like Well, we're all just here, and now it's a good time to really focus on the yoga practice. Because what else are you going to do? Might as well pursue the spiritual endeavor. Now is a good time for that.
Yeah, mindfulness, patience, all those things,
Yeah.
all those other qualities and of the practice as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And moving, keeping the body moving.
yes, movement, definitely.
Hmm.
Yes, I mean it's interesting. It's very unique. Very, it's not very common. I think metal yoga, as some people might call it. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm just also fascinated and curious about your interest personally, also with the movement and in the studio with people around you in close proximity. And you have a certain kind of music, usually equated with melancholy or bleakness or
Yeah, like
misanthropy,
anger.
anger in some way,
Yeah.
some dark
Yeah,
undertones. It's mystical at the same time. It's almost trance-like in certain parts. So how does
exactly.
it feel to have this? Because I personally have not done even though I am into uh, I've played in heavy metal bands and I've done
Mhm.
Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. I've never really had a class done like that.
Yeah.
So how
Well,
experientially, how is it like with this kind of music and the movement?
to be clear, I offer the metal yoga as kind of a fun thing, um, to make it sort of more appealing to people who want to have a kind of casual practice and listen to music. And yeah, those trancy kind of esoteric vibes can put you in a cool meditative state. You can kind of enjoy that, and the music can enhance the practice. But I don't call that Ashtanga yoga. My main focus is on teaching authentic
Yes.
or traditional Ashtanga yoga as I learned it from the gurus, Sri Patabi Joyce and Sharat Joyce. So there's no music. It's not really meant to be fun. We don't do it because it's like fun per se. So I feel like the metal yoga is a little bit more fun for people who just, want to enjoy some benefits of moving and breathing and stretching. And then you still derive a lot of the benefits without having to kind of take it quite as seriously as we do in the Ashtanga school.
Yeah. So my next question, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit right here.
Okay.
So top 10 metal albums, top
Top
10
10.
metal,
Oh,
or top
I
10
can't
metal band.
possibly name
Yeah,
10 metal
10. Yeah.
albums in order.
Any groups
Uh,
which you've been listening to these days or have been very influential to you over a large span of your life?
yeah, well, many. I'm one of those people that like will never be able to name the albums and the singers and who played the guitar and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Band.
I
Yeah.
I was listening today to Necros Christos. I really like
Right.
them. I like Acherontas a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
Cult of Fire I've been listening to lately. I also really love Mournful Congregation, and even when I lived in Portland, local bands like Agalock.
Yeah.
Different styles, those are just some that come to mind off the top of my head. I'm a big, huge Dissection fan, of course.
Right.
Even like Old Morbid Angel, although I wouldn't really play that in the yoga class, but
Too
just things
chaotic.
I like.
Yeah.
Um, I like and I really like when metal bands, you don't hear it too much, but when you do, I really like if they do things that kind of combine that like more Vedic chanting type stuff, or I don't know, even like Tibetan kind of Eastern influences with the metal. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Necros Christos. That was the first band you mentioned. You
Yeah.
mentioned a list of bands. That was the first band. Yeah, I remember listening to them a couple of years ago, and I think they fuse a lot of different, even lyrically, a lot of different diverse influences, East and West, and
Mm-hmm.
occultism as well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it based on also Kali and Shiva at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's why I like it so much.
And there's some Kabbalah as well, I think, in
Yeah,
there
I'm
as well.
sure.
Yeah, so I think definitely very well researched, and I think the lyrics, the style, the production, the way it's done, is also very complimentary as well. The style of music,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, Morbid Angel, yeah, early
I mean,
Morbid
these are
Angel.
just like old influences. You asked, like, kind of what has influenced me in my life. I was kind of going back to the real metal days, you know. Those are kind of over now, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw a really great band recently called Mar. I really loved that, and kind of some more obscure stuff, I guess.
yes, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because strength, sadhana, shakti, and there's this. It's not three separate things, right? It's interconnected. It's intertwined
Yeah,
within
to
this
me,
sphere.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely. I mean, to me, it's quite intertwined. I feel like the strength practice is a part of my sadhana, or is a sadhana in itself. You know, it's a practice like yoga practice is, in a way. And the Shakti is more to just speak to the feminine as, aspect of it. You know, that I feel like it could be really easy to. I think strength training is kind of a masculinely dominated area generally, although I know a lot of super strong, cool women, but it's got that kind of feel to it, you know. And I don't know, I just feel like somehow maintaining the femininity, even when doing these kind of typically masculine endeavors, is kind of where I'm coming from.
yeah. So any particular favorite qualities you have of the goddess, whichever emanation, whichever form, the wrathful deities, or rather the goddess.
Yeah, I definitely um, am more drawn towards like the dark mother. I would say I'm her daughter. You know, it's Kali takes. I use the word or the name Kali. I think means just like kind of a name that covers all of the goddesses in a way. Like they're all manifestations of her ultimately, or that's one name you could give to this sort of ultimate mother who is by nature dark, you know, kind of sinister, not necessarily like a Mother Mary, like white virginess thing, more like a devouring kind of wrathful aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
this interesting book by David Frawley on the
Yes.
Mahavidyas.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm sure I've read it.
Yeah,
I know he speaks of well, of the 10 Mahavidyas and of Chinnamasta
Namaste, number 6.
is my personal favorite. Yeah, love
Like,
Chinnamasta. So that kind of tells a lot about, I think, a person.
yeah,
Like
it's
if you
highly symbolic as well.
totally, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
So, and it's a lot having to do with like kind of becoming egoless, I suppose.
yes. I think for me as well, Chinnamasta, but more so with Kali and Vajra Yogini,
Yes.
the very wrathful forms. And some of these goddesses or emanations or whatever you might call them, I mean, it also is in Tibetan Buddhism. in a slightly different package or very different name as well. I
Yes, well,
think
Vajrayogini comes from there.
yeah, definitely. So, like your daily routine, which is on a constant sense over the years, like, do you have a certain kind of routine you go by, waking up at a certain time, doing a certain
Yeah.
ritual or something before you go to sleep? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I'm more of a morning person. I get up early to practice, so it depends. Sometimes I have to change things for when I'm teaching, but because Ashtanga yoga is practiced early in the morning, I do that first. But um, you know, I kind of wish I could do strength training first and then practice yoga afterwards. And sometimes I do that because it just feels so good. It's much safer to practice the weightlifting and then do yoga afterwards. You get this kind of vigorous kind of stimulation of the nervous system with the strength and conditioning. And then if you go into yoga practice, you kind of can calm down the nervous system and the mind becomes quiet and the body feels more open and relaxed. And it's just really lovely, and you can feel quite ecstatic, I think, and just really peaceful as well through this practice. It's really clarifying. But Ashtanga really works best first thing in the morning or as soon as possible, I think, after waking. That's when it's really supposed to be practiced, so I typically stick to that. I like to wake up and do some meditation and some chanting before I do my asana practice. I'll do some, maybe some japa or just a few chants. And asana practice is usually about 2 hours I spend. And then I will take a break and try to recover and then do my Wolf Brigade training in the afternoon. So kettlebells and weightlifting and conditioning, kind of like more high intensity conditioning stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then try to go to bed early and sleep and kind of take care of the body as much as possible, like nourish it properly and take rest, and in order to be able to do it again. And I'm not the best at it. I was a smoker and a drinker for years and years, and still have these kind of kind of not, I don't really go out anymore, but occasionally I get off the track, who doesn't, but I'm not the best, like, purest yogi that ever walked the face of the earth. I'm sure of that. I still kind of partake in the occasional good time, and the practice is it's a lifelong endeavor at this point, so I don't worry about it too much. I never allow myself to get so far off the track. I'm talking like if I miss one day or one practice or two practices or something, that's as far as it ever goes.
Yeah.
So I really maintain a focus on that, and then I try to make everything else support that as much as possible without just becoming completely bored with my life, because
Yeah.
I still need to kind of live in the world, and have fun, and not just like fast every night and wake up and do these austerities day after day. I mean, it's already kind of a lot, it's like enough is enough. I try to not I try to not be too loose with myself and let myself get away with making excuses and slacking. But I think maybe my idea of slacking is different than the average person's now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have this consistent practice for the most part of many years, and that takes a lot of sheer discipline, and I really commend that. I think it's very difficult, to dedicate that amount, like waking up early, doing the meditation, doing the asana practice, and so on and so forth. Really, it's like it sets the tone for the day in a certain way. So it's a certain intention, it's a certain mindset, it's a
Yeah.
body mind correlation. It's a certain resonance. And yeah, you did mention about a bit more of the personal side of things from your end as well. And I think also it's very important to accept things as they are. As sometimes we go through these things which a lot of strict discipline, and sometimes it's, even if we fall down, it's what I do admire about you is you keep going. You keep going no matter what. And I think that's something like a lot of us can learn from, is to keep going and to keep doing the best we can, the best version of ourselves each day, and to also at the same time not to beat ourselves up too much, like compassion,
Yeah.
self-kindness, being kind to ourselves.
Well, I thank the practice for that. Like, I don't necessarily credit myself with having so much discipline. I feel like when I started practicing Ashtanga, I just was like struck by, well, initially just how different I felt after the first practice, how much better I felt, how much benefit I derived from it. And that's what really, that can just kind of keep propelling you, is when you realize how much you benefit from the work that you put in. But it was really impressed upon me very early that Ashtanga is almost daily discipline, and that's just what it is. That's its nature. You practice in the morning when you're committed to it. Not everybody does this, but a lot of people are drawn to it kind of for that. They say, oh, type A personalities or whatever love Ashtanga, but I mean, I guess so. I can see that, but it requires, some discipline for sure, but it's kind of built into the practice, so that after some time, I think what happens when a lot of people will sometimes come to me and say like, oh, I want to practice with you. And I said, okay, well, I'll be there at Monday at 6 a.m. And I'm there, but they're nowhere to be found. And it's like, oh, I was up late, I slept in, and okay, well, I made it,
Yeah.
where I didn't you. And I think that the thing is, people aren't used to that. What happens when you practice Ashtanga for some time is that when you wake up in the morning and you're tired and your mind starts telling you, oh, you should go back to bed and you should just skip class and da 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 da. But when you really get just kind of like passionate about Ashtanga, you start to you still get those messages from the mind in the morning telling you just skip class, but you just kind of don't listen to it. After a while, it gets easier and easier to basically ignore those messages, even though they may not go away entirely. You just stop listening to it and you just go and do the practice. It happened to me this morning. I really didn't want to practice, and my mind was thinking of all these excuses. But next thing I know, I just was practicing and I hit the button. I was with my teacher on Zoom, and I could have not done it, but it's that kind of that like wiring that neural pathway or something. When you're new to it, if you haven't experienced that like super strong pull where you just become kind of impassioned about something and you just want to go there at 6 in the morning, do this thing that's kind of uncomfortable sometimes. It makes you kind of deal with yourself,
Yeah.
without distractions. Your mind is just kind of laid bare before you. You have to kind of face yourself because there's nothing to distract you from it. And I don't know, it can be difficult. You don't want to do that. It's not always comfortable. It can be physically uncomfortable. It takes a lot of effort and can be quite a challenge, but I feel like when you do that for long enough, it becomes second nature to just keep doing it.
Yeah.
I guess. Some people quit and come back. Some people quit and just stop. I never have felt that yet.
Yeah. What I just noticed, I mean, we have like a few minutes left, and I was just checking the time, and I have this app on my phone which is following the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. And so where I'm at now in Singapore, it's 8 a.m. and it's Dakini Day. So,
Dakini Day.
so it's all intertwined with what we're speaking about, and yeah, beautiful. So in the last few minutes, based on what you're all about regarding strength, sadhana, and shakti. Let's say a beginner student, someone just very new into yoga, comes up to you to ask for some kind of recommendations, tips, advices, and all that. Would you straight away recommend this person to move into Ashtanga yoga, or how would you approach it?
Yes, definitely. I do recommend Ashtanga yoga, and I recommend learning it in the proper way, according to the proper method, which is coming back day after day and developing that daily discipline that we were just talking about. I feel like that's such a crux of the whole endeavor. It's so important, and you do little by little. You learn the sequence. You do sun salutations and sit, and maybe the practice takes 15 minutes. And try not to be attached to the idea that you're going to do a bunch of poses that if you haven't been practicing them regularly or in the correct way according to the method, then you're probably doing it not very well anyway, and it's maybe even dangerous to go to kind of a mixed level class with a teacher you never met before. My advice is to find a teacher that you resonate with and go and devote yourself to the practice, to commit to doing it for at least a month. I mean, that's a very modern attention span way of putting it, because usually they say you should practice for at least a year before you can determine if it's really for you. So some people have trouble committing to a week or 2 weeks. They want to come to one class, and you can't really get a good idea of what is going to happen from establishing an ongoing practice from one drop-in class. So find a good teacher and then discipline yourself to a regular practice that's short, and learning Surya Namaskar A, sun salutations, Surya Namaskar B, learning it in order, not trying to do fancy things, but just paying attention to the breath, honestly, and practicing, not trying to become a teacher, just practicing.
Yeah. So
just
yeah.
give it a try. I mean, it's just that I feel like a lot of people like yoga now. It's very popular.
Yes.
It's usually popular, but I don't think a lot of it's really yoga practice, as far as I can tell. So it just depends what you're interested in. If you want to move your body and breathe deeply and relax, that's great. Like, that's never bad.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you're after something a bit deeper or something profound, then it's going to take a lot of practice and discipline and discomfort and probably a lot of disappointment over a long period of time. Yeah. And then you're actually really transformed by it.
Yes. So just as what you mentioned, I mean, everyone watching this, I mean, find a teacher, stick to the discipline, no shortcuts, do things a traditional way, but at the same time, knowing your capacity at that moment, right? It could be a 15-minute practice. It could be sun salutations at first, but just being kind to yourself in a way, but persevering each time in a traditional way. So in this last minute or so, I mean, we spoke about the practical side of yoga. So in terms of, is there someone who's new into spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, whichever aspect, would you recommend a certain practice, a certain book, a certain, something you just off the top of your mind?
A certain book?
Any books you would recommend, which has been very influential for you on your path?
No, I mean, I read a lot of books.
Right.
I don't really know. I mean, I read books from different disciplines that we've talked of as well. Where yoga asana or to tantra to like we were talking about Buddhism or Dzogchen, or even occult studies. There's so many. I can't really say just one, honestly. Like, yeah, you should read the texts, the original texts if you're interested in yoga. But, you could learn yoga postures from a book, or at least the basic principles of hatha yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have one that comes to mind, honestly, or one that I would really recommend above others.
Yeah.
I think it's more important to find a teacher.
Yes. Yeah. As you mentioned, traditional texts. So, for some people who, as you recommended about the traditional study with the guru. So traditional texts, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, there's various yoga.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, are you really gonna apply what you learned from reading the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras? Just be able to, I mean, it's not really like entry level for one thing, and
Yes.
And then, if you read the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, like, how much does that really apply in our modern life now? Like, it's hard to say it's that applicable, really, or pertinent to modern. Yes, I mean, if you want to go into a study of yoga traditions and Patanjali Yoga and Hatha Yoga, then yes, of course you'll read those texts. And read the Bhagavad Gita, and read the Vedas, I guess, or the Upanishads. But I don't know. I guess I'm also more interested now in kind of where those Eastern technologies meet with kind of Western esotericism,
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. There isn't one kind of definitive text that comes to mind. I feel like more explore, I guess I would say. I encourage people to explore.
Yeah.
One book does come to mind. I forget what it's called, by Christopher Wallace.
Right.
Book about the tantras. I have it here on my Audible.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's called
Christopher Wallace. Oh, okay.
Tantra Illuminated. Tantra Illuminated. That's a good one that sort of introduces you to like basic,
right,
the principles of tantrism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for your kindness, sharing your compassion, your wisdom. You know,
Thanks. Thanks
this
for interviewing me. It's
yeah,
fun.
it's the first time I've done something like this. I'm not sure about yourself,
Oh,
and you know, I mean, what I think is really beneficial is like how you share your experiences and some of these advices. You know, something people can reflect upon, can take as a certain kind of tips, and actually for those who are trying to begin on certain practice, there are a lot of things actually in this discussion which we have covered. And people into music as well, they get to know you, you know, some of your favorite bands and also some of
yeah.
your personal practices at the same time. So I'd like to thank
I know
you.
those are my favorite bands. I can't believe this. Morbid Angel was one of my favorite bands. Although the old stuff was really good.
Yeah.
But like, I guess my thought that I just want to express, that's sort of tying all these things together. You know, we're talking about strength, sadhana, shakti. I think that my point that I want to make is that I feel that this spirituality, which is sort of ultimate importance, is very much tied to the physical body. And of course, this is a base foundational principle of Tantra. You know, we talk about Patanjali yoga, but I guess I feel like now I'm viewing Patanjali yoga, or that style of Ashtanga yoga, somehow through a more tantric lens, and even through a feminine lens in that way. But that our spirituality kind of, it's so entwined with our physical being that the divinity is actually in the flesh, you know. And so we need to care for it, you know. We need to cultivate the shakti, that life force energy, and the prana, and physically and mentally, you know. It's just very much tied together. I think that yoga is really taking care of the the vehicle, you know. It's not just a vehicle, it is the embodiment of the spirit. So that's why I guess I kept practicing for so long and continue to practice, is because of how much benefit is derived from these things, that I feel like once you discover it, it's hard to ever look back, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very profound. So as what you mentioned, just to recap, and that in that the last bit was the body mind connection and also embodiment, practice,
Yeah,
practice,
practice.
practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's oversaid, but that's really what it is. And that's what Patabi Joyce, you know, one of his famous quotes, not just practice, practice, practice. It's kind of a joke, but the other one was, it's 99% practice, 1% theory.
Yes,
Yeah, so no armchair ashtangis.
yes.
Get
And
on the
what was the other one he said? Was it all is coming?
all is practice, all is coming. Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about God, what he called God, you know. So
Right.
that's what he was referring to, not you'll get your feet behind your head, I think, which is also something that can happen if you practice a lot.
Yes. So
But
definitely, yeah, this is you know, I hope this sharing, this co-creation will be very beneficial to anyone watching. And I will include links for Leilah Devi right in the description. So it's going to be your website and whichever contact details. So if you would like to know much more of her practice and get inspired by her videos, I will include the links. So Leilah, thank you once again, you
yes,
know,
thank you. My
and
pleasure, Josh.
much blessings. And
Same to
yeah,
you.
definitely looking forward to hearing more about your journey as life unfolds.
Okay, sure. Same to you.
Okay,
Okay. Oh, so see you next time, I guess.
see you.
Bye.
Bye bye.